Well, welcome back, everybody, to Between Two Sermons. Once again, Rob, great having you here
Yeah,
with us.
great to
Rob
be with you, my
Callen.
good brother.
All right, and
September, whatever. Here
whatever
we
it
are,
is,
Yeah.
just after this Sunday would have been September. I can't remember
Yeah, I know.
anymore.
Middle,
It's just
almost the middle.
Yeah, middle of September. So hope everybody's doing well. We're going to dive right on into the sermon of the week. True Vision is what
Yeah.
you called this one.
Yeah.
Interesting title,
Yeah.
I think. And you're talking about the disciples have just seen the feeding of the 5,000 in Mark, the feeding of the 4,000. Jesus is on a boat with them. They're having this big argument among themselves in a little bit of what is Jesus trying to tell us. He says,
Right.
beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and of Herod. And
Right.
they're like, oh, man, he's mad at us for not bringing bread. And it's kind of this comical scene a little bit.
It is. Comical and serious at the same time.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And so you delved into that, and I loved some of the points you made, and I want to kind of go back to them. I think the first place you started with this story was really highlighting the need for humility
Yeah.
in there. What stood out to you about that?
in humility too, we all value it, and it's something that's, kind of a theme of this series. But what impressed me about this is that humility also affects the way that you see the world. So I didn't always think of it that way. Like I know I should be more humble, and I want to be more humble, but sometimes I could feel like I'm not humble, but I really it's not really affecting the way I see things. It's just affecting the way I'm received. But I think humility here in this passage, really shows. It might be a way to say it's one of the ways that we see clearly and truly, because our pride gets in the way. And even as you were mentioning just in our previous conversation about this sermon off camera, when we were talking about, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and of Herod. Of course, it's a metaphor, but he's saying, what is this thing, this agent, right? If yeast is an agent that is in the life of these individuals, to follow the metaphor, that is affecting them in a negative way, because it's a warning, and it seems to be pride, maybe attached to a desire for power.
Right.
And so, because the Pharisees, they derived their power from the temple and in their role as religious leaders. Jesus was threatening that, so they didn't like that. And Herod, of course, who didn't care about theology, but he cared about, his own ego and his own rule. And Jesus, as even a supposed or so-called king isn't going to go well with him either. So it was power. So I think, especially in this Citizens of Heaven series, we're trying to say, I think I may have said this the first week, how does Jesus, who is our model of how to be a citizen of heaven, how to be a person and walk through this life, how does he interact with power? How does he respond to even the politics of his day? And it seems like he's dealing with people who are hungry for power, and that's blinding them from the truth. Because Jesus, who is, of course, the Son of God, and he's exerted a lot of power through his influence, but he didn't come leading with top-down power. He came leading with selfless service power, and that's big. So that's one of the things that really, when you talk about humility, it's really recognizing that, the way of Jesus, what does it mean to be a citizen of heaven or to be a follower of Jesus, means that we're not, we have to be careful in the world's game of wanting to seek power, because that's, you might say that's even though it's politics, but it's be more than politics.
Right. Yeah, I think that's such a great point that we probably need to camp out there just for a few minutes, because I think for us in our society, we're almost blinded to it.
Yeah.
The idea of we're free people, we could achieve power.
Yeah.
Even the church has been guilty of this
That's right.
from time to time, maybe more than just time to time.
Yeah.
To try to achieve our ends
That's
the way
right.
that the world is
that's
achieving
right.
its ends.
That's right.
And it always gets us in a bad spot when we do that. And it's here Jesus has this formidable moment with his disciples where he's trying to say, you are going to be the leaders of the church.
Yeah.
You need to pay attention
Yeah.
to what I'm saying. And he's saying it's totally different.
Yeah, no, I love what you just said. Trying to achieve our ends the way the world tries to achieve their ends. That's such a powerful statement. And that is really what has hurt the church past and present. And it's all the more amped up in a season when it's a highly, it's of course the presidential election, election season, but in a season where there's so much division, and a lot of the divisions about what I have and want and need, whether it's security or well-being, and of course the world's way, they only know one way, and I'm not trying to be negative, but if I didn't have faith in God, I don't have an idea beyond this life. I have to go after what I want. I have to claim my rights. Sometimes even in hurt people in the pursuit of it. Maybe that's the way the world runs, and it's sad. And it's a warning, maybe as Jesus says, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and of Herod. He's saying that to us today, beware. If you're trying to be a citizen of heaven, playing by the world's rules of how you gain security and gain what you think you need, you're not going in the way of Jesus. And so I do think that's really important. And as you were saying, it's kind of comical that Jesus they seem to be a little anxious that they only have a single loaf of bread. That's what it says, just in one verse. It doesn't mean there's no backstory to it. They just, in the sense of we don't really know why that statement is said. But Jesus picks up on it. And there's this great irony because Jesus goes on to say, friends, do you not even remember? Two times, 7 questions, but 2 times. Don't you remember what we just did? Yeah. Not just that I performed a miracle, but even this kind of miracle where we fed thousands of people, right? We know this is the universal symbol of Christianity. And now you guys, of all people, my team, you're in this boat actually wondering if you're going to be hungry. With Jesus, 1 loaf is more than enough.
Right.
But that's not the world's way of looking at things.
Yeah, that's a beautiful statement.
Yeah.
1 loaf is more than enough with Jesus.
Yeah.
I love that statement.
Yeah.
And I think because what that statement does is it goes, where am I trusting? Where am I trusting?
That's right. Exactly.
What do you think some of those areas where we are tempted to trust the world's ways of power versus the power that Jesus has? And even in this season, maybe I can even be as specific as saying even in this season, where are those ways?
I think it's trusting first for our needs, relatively speaking, if this video was on, trans video radio or whatever, relative to other places in the world, you and I are doing better than most of the world. Okay, but that being said, as we think about our culture and our community, people, inflation, people, are their needs going to be met? Are they going to have their job? So when it comes to issues of financial security, when it comes to issues of even security in the sense of national security, I think there's a lot of fears that people have. Even the whole immigration debate is both about economics and about national security, about personal security and national security. So I think those are areas. And I think the question is, it's not that we should be, completely indifferent to these issues and we have an opinion, but ultimately, my trust is for my needs. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, in His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. That's my hopefully the way in which I live my life, and I shouldn't be losing sleep over. And seeing the world in this zero-sum way. So I think those are certainly security and having my needs met are things that people think about.
Yeah. I think all of us, right?
Yeah.
One point or another, we're faced with that every day.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you kind of landed the plane with, hey, our focus
Yeah.
needs to be on Jesus.
Right.
That's where
Right.
our focus needs to go. Because when our focus is there,
Yeah.
everything else works itself out. I think you
Yeah.
have a C.S. Lewis quote in
Yeah,
there
yeah.
about that.
Yeah, no,
as
I think
well.
that's and even in the C.S. Lewis quotes, many people have probably heard it. It's just one of these, ubiquitous or often used quotes. It's so rich that he's talking about dying to your own ambitions, getting out of your own way, back to humility. But in a sense, we are our own worst enemies. Because our fears become outsized, our anxieties become outside. As we begin to think about life as if we were living on our own, as if we were not sons and daughters of Jesus, of the King, as if we really were just having to meet all our own needs in our own strength, which is perhaps what people who don't have a faith believe. It makes sense, but why are we living that way? So the constant you talked about this too a couple of weeks ago, but the constant daily challenge is to be connected to Jesus, is to, and it's not just a flipping a switch or making a decision. It's an in-breathing and out-breathing way to realize that with Jesus, one loaf is enough, and that is a way of saying he has demonstrated. I might be at any given time have struggling in various areas. I'm underemployed, or I'm under I'm missing, my relationships are imperfect, whatever it is. At any given moment, we're all going to have lacks and needs. But I think the point is, Jesus is saying, if you look at the big picture, as he's saying, do you not remember the 5 and the 7? Do you not remember what happened? And our challenge is to say, I want to keep remembering that. I want to remember what God has done, what I believe he's doing and will do, even as we talked about last week in this introduction. And that needs to inspire and settle me and you, so that we can walk in this world and not be as anxious and fearful as others around us are.
Those are great words, I think, for us to internalize over the course of the week. And I think even for those of us who are having these discussions within our small groups, I think this is a great way to kind of maybe launch into that discussion.
Yeah.
What are some of those things that we trust apart from Jesus naturally in our lives to bring us a sense of security and hope?
That's right.
What are the things that we naturally cling to in our lives that are maybe not necessarily even bad things, but things that we run to apart from Jesus?
Right.
Because I think that's where he wants us to use even those things to say, I want to trust and put my focus all on him.
Right. No, that's it. I think, things can become too important, and it's not all good or bad. They become too important, too outsized, and then back to true vision. It just becomes, you've heard this, many people say, if you want to know what somebody really cares about, look at their checkbook. Although, I don't know, for those who don't know what a checkbook is, but anyway. But, how do they spend their money? But there's a sense in which there's that's true, and you could even say, look at their watch or something, in other words, or their calendar. How do they spend their time? Or, if we could do this, what occupies their thoughts? And those are all, in a sense, about vision. Are you if Christ is more and more the center of my life, what does that mean? That I have a strong sense of his presence, of his word, of his promises, and revisiting them. Then I'm not perfect. I'm not problem free or worry free, but I can be a much more settled person, even in what we would call, relatively speaking, unsettled environments or unsettled times, because that's not where I'm drawing all of my strength from. I'm not drawing my whole life based upon the ups and downs of the world around me.
Right.
And so maintaining that true vision day in and day out is so important for us.
Great reminder. Thanks, Rob, for that. And thank you all for joining us. Hope this leads into a great discussion for you, and I'm pretty sure it will. And as we reflect on it this week, I hope that it becomes part of how we're living as well, not just discussing, but how we're living. So that's why we do what we're doing here, and we hope to see you next week at Between Two Sermons.
Okay.